All right. Well, welcome everyone. Sorry for technical issues. We were also discussing, is anyone going to choose our panel discussion? Would anyone come? We are very happy that you're here. So very warm welcome to our panel discussion that is called Sweden and Swedes in the EU. Time to take a seat at the table where the decisions are made. During this panel discussion, we are going to reflect about Sweden's role in EU. Why is it important to have Swedes working at EU administration? And also we would see what opportunities are there that Swedes are probably missing when they do not choose this career path. As you all know, and at EU Days Lund several times today, they have mentioned this 30 years of Swedish membership. So a lot has changed since this membership, and the union has grown, it has changed and faced challenges that we haven't even imagined back in 1995. One thing that has gotten worse, I would say, is representation of Swedes at EU administration among staff at institutions, despite 30 years of membership. And gone are the days when, back in 1995, I'm sure there are some EU Swedes here that witnessed that wave of interest when so many were eager to join EU as staff members and were competing for a chance to work for European Commission and Parliament and filled hangars and gyms and other big spaces just to write the test. Now, 30 years later, we are very happy if we get at least 500 applications per year from Swedes, and that is a very, very serious problem. And that's why today we will try to understand what does it mean to work for EU, why it is important, and why is it important to have geographical balance. That we're going to do with the distinguished panelists. I have guests joining me. It's Heike Grass, Deputy Head of Unit for the European Selection Office, Erik Rudal, Senior Advisor at the Prime Minister's Office, and online with us we have my colleague Matilda Rotkisch, a Minister's Counselor at Swedish Permanent Representation to the EU. Matilda is joining us online, and that was also part of the EU resilience and problem-solving competency that is very important when you work for EU institutions. You are, at the end of the session, going to have a chance to ask questions through Menti. We're not going to go around with the microphone, so please take a chance to write your question there. And with that, I want to also introduce myself. I am Asya Risantseva. I am coordinator for EU recruitment at the Swedish Council for Higher Education, working with the government assignment to inform about career opportunities at EU institutions, agencies and bodies, and by supporting Swedes that are choosing EU career path with information, guidance, training and coaching. I hope that the Swedish Council for Higher Education, with the support of colleagues both at Perm Representation and with government initiatives, is giving opportunities for Swedes applying for EU careers to succeed. And with that, I would like to start our discussion, and I turn to you, Heike, with the first question. EU careers, what do we actually mean when we talk about EU careers? What opportunities are there? Because many Swedes sometimes say that this is nothing for me because I'm not political, but EU careers is so much more than that. So, and EPSO definitely has much to say about opportunities.
Yeah. Thank you. This works? Yeah. No, thank you very much, and hello everybody here. Thank you for being there. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to be invited to be in this panel and to share some information about EU careers, maybe demystify some of it also, because there are a lot of wrong perceptions circulating, and it gives me the opportunity to talk about this immense range of different EU career possibilities. And the first thing I'd like to say there is there's not like one EU career. There are loads of different ways how you can work for the EU institutions. You can be a trainee for 5 months. Any of the EU institutions and many agencies offer traineeships. That is a great first step in. There are also contracts that have a limited time, so you could work as a contract or temporary staff for 1 year up to 6 years. Or you can work as in the EU civil service as a permanent official, and for that you have to take tests, and these tests are organized by us, by EPSO, the European Personnel Selection Office. We are an interinstitutional office that organizes these tests to get into the EU institutions. Then very important is also, you might know, or maybe not, the EU institutions are mainly located in Brussels and in Luxembourg, but there are loads of agencies spread all over the EU member states. We have representation in each EU member state, and we have delegations worldwide. So it is a quite big net and interesting, depending on your background, to work in one place or the other. Then, according to what we heard this morning already in the panels, EU careers can be in any kind of field. We're looking for young people, for students, for young professionals who want to play an active role in shaping Europe of tomorrow, to improve things, to be part of the Europe that you want and that is changing. We are looking for loads of different people with different profiles. We are looking for lawyers, for economists. We are looking for researchers, scientists, IT specialists, translators. We're looking for experts, with or without job experience, who work in all these policy areas we heard talking of this morning. We're looking for people who work with migration, with crisis management, with defense, security. We're looking for people working in digitalization or with AI, or people who are working with international relations, trade. All this we heard this morning, environment, climate change. These are top priority political issues that all happen around us today, and we need people who are ready to work in the EU institutions to agree and have an EU common policy on this, and new regulations, maybe new laws. So that is really important and might fit to some of you depending on your backgrounds. We are looking for people on 2 levels, assistant levels and the so-called administrator levels. Administrator means somebody who has a university degree. And that is also why it is so important and why we're here at these career events to get more people in. And just 2 more words about an EU career also means you need to have knowledge of 2 languages, so 2 of the 24 official EU languages. Besides your mother tongue, it needs to be another language. It does not necessarily have to be French. A lot of people think you have to be fluent in French. No, you can choose altogether between 24 official EU languages. And one thing also important, mobility is a big importance in the EU institutions. You can have an internal mobility. Once you're in there, you can move between the different European institutions, there are 10 of them, between agencies, between different services. Internally, there's a huge internal job market. So it's not that you have to stick to one career for the rest of your life once you become an EU official. That's absolutely not the case. And we promote lifelong learning, continuous learning. So there's a lot of possibilities once in the house that you develop your skills, your knowledge in a special field, your IT skills, language skills, management skills. So all this together forms the possibility of an EU career in a nutshell.
Thank you very much, Heike. It's really unlimited opportunities, and I think tomorrow, if you want to know what it means to work at Brussels at institutions, Pernilla and Cecilia here are going to have a workshop, and they are working at the European Parliament and talk about their experiences, so you can definitely follow up with questions on that. Unlimited opportunities, as you said, for everyone, different profiles. Very strange that Swedes are missing out on this unlimited opportunities. So, Erik, my question is to you. How does it look for Sweden? We talk about underrepresentation. What does it mean in reality? And is it as critical as for, I think 2 years ago, Politico wrote this article about Viking funeral. Lately, they talked about the Renaissance. What does it look actually for Sweden at the EU arena when it comes to staff?
Well, thank you, Asya, and thank you for having the opportunity to being here and talk about EU recruitment issues, a very important issue. And it's right, that article had a very striking and dark headline, I think. To some extent, it is, of course, true. The situation is critical, I would say. And it will most likely get worse before it gets better. And we have a situation where more experienced Swedes that got jobs when we became members of the Union in 1995 will retire in the coming years. And there are not enough young Swedes entering to fill this gap. I could talk a lot about different numbers and so on, what the deficit looks like, but I will not go into detail on the numbers. But there are many reasons behind this development. I mean, the physical distance to Brussels being one obvious one, of course. But also, I think, over the years, a general lack of interest in EU affairs in Swedish society has played a role. I also think that a relatively good labor market for young academics in Sweden has played a role. And of course, the long and often cumbersome recruitment processes, they are definitely not pull factors if you want to work in an EU institutions. And then why is it a problem to have too few Swedes working in the institutions? Well, as the minister said this morning, it's not an issue of individual member states having concrete influence and power over legislative work in, let's say, the Commission. The staff of the institutions, they work for the EU. They do not serve member states' capitals, and that's very important. But with Swedish officials on the inside, there is a greater chance that Swedish perspectives and values and so on, as the minister also said this morning, will be considered when, for example, the Commission prepares new initiatives. It might be in forestry affairs, the capital markets union, or labor market related issues, for example, which are very sensitive in Sweden. So I think quite simply, and this is of course the case for all member states, the importance of having people from their own citizens on the inside. The quality of legislation will be better. I mean, the output of what let's say the Commission does will be better. And the issue of geographical balance, I would say, is geographical balance of staff is ultimately an issue of legitimacy and credibility of the EU cooperation as such. And therefore, it's also a highly political issue. And that is why the issue of underrepresentation is getting attention, it's gaining attention at the political level in capitals and also in Brussels. And this is also the case in Stockholm. And there is now a systematic discussion going on in the Council of Ministers, for example, on the issue of underrepresentation. And this was not the case just a few years ago. So what action is then taken by Swedish authorities to try to change this trend? Well, over the last few years, I would say that the government has been working strategically on this issue. The key actors being the EU coordination at the PM's office, the permanent representation in Brussels, we'll listen to Matilda later on, and of course the Council for Higher Education, where ASIA works. And this strategy includes a doubling of resources to the Council this year. And the Council is tasked by the government, and it gets funding via the state budget to carry out training activities, coaching, and information activities to young academics who are interested in an EU career. Many of you know about that, and you follow the Council in social media, etc., for example. We have also stepped up activities at the Perm Rep in Brussels. They are putting a lot of efforts into establishing and maintaining networks and offering support to Swedes in all staff categories working in the EU institutions. We have seen a rise in the number of Swedish national experts seconded to the EU institutions from Swedish agencies and the government offices. We had 77 last year. There will be an increase to 83 over the next 12 months. So we've seen an increase there, even though more could be done in that field, I would say. And one investment that has been done over the last few years have been in scholarships to the College of Europe in Bruges, Natolin, and Tirana. I mean, Minister Rosenkrantz talked about that as well, and that has had a great effect. I mean, this year, 20 students were admitted to the college. 17 in the end decided to start studying at the College of Europe. And this is a tremendous increase of students, I would say. And another interesting initiative that was presented in the budget, the state budget just yesterday, and it was quite a lot of media attention last week about it, is that the government will invest up to 60 million Swedish crowns in 2027 in master programs at Swedish universities in public administration with an EU focus. This is very early days, and there will be more information how this will be carried out in detail. But I think also that that is a very interesting initiative that will contribute to more Swedes working in the institutions in the long run. So a lot of action is taken, actually. Will it lead to a renaissance of Swedish presence in the EU institutions? I think so, and we can already see some positive signs and results, but it will take time. And a lot of hard work lay ahead of us until Sweden is sufficiently represented in the Union, I think.
Thank you very much, Erik, and I can definitely confirm that the work with the matter is intensified. As you mentioned, the Council has very much support, and even we see more results in our work, that more of you are coming to our events. We have many people getting in touch saying that I am ready to go to Brussels or Luxembourg tomorrow. What should I do? Please give me guidance in my career. So absolutely, we see the results, but maybe it would take a bit longer than we wish it does right now. I would like to know if my colleague Matilda is online, and maybe we can bring her up on the screen.
Hello, good morning everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, good morning, Matilda. Good. So I would like to have a question to you. So it's very good that there is strategic work on the government side, but you work very much practically with the matter of underrepresentation and geographical balance. So maybe you can explain what you do in practice, because you are in touch with both institution services, HR services, and also working closely with Swedes, both applying for work and traineeship at institutions and even those actually making it to reserve lists.
Thank you, Asia. And let me just start by saying how delighted I am to take part of this fantastic event that the EU Days Lund is. But to be able to be present there in Lund, the city where I once studied myself, and wonderful university town. So, as you said, yes, in Brussels, our work with having more Swedes working in EU is very hands-on when it comes to implementing the strategy that Erik has just described. So I thought I would share 3 examples with you. There are many, but I chose 3. So the first I would talk about is how we work with EU trainees. And just to say that all institutions offer traineeship programs for graduates. And doing a traineeship is a fantastic way to get a foot in the door, and that can really be a start of a long career in EU. We see it that way, and also the institutions see it that way. Because as a trainee, you quickly become part of the team, you take on responsibility, and you gain a unique insight in how EU machinery works from the inside. And it's also an excellent opportunity to build networks. And you all know that Brussels is a lot about networking. And many who start as trainees, we see that they later get on temporary contracts and they join talent programs and they continue to work in the EU. So here at the Swedish representation, we support trainees in several ways. Together with ASIA, the Council of Higher Education, we organize network events, several for trainees. We also run a mentoring program here at the Perm Rep, and that is where we every trainee is matched together with a Swede working in the EU and get advice and can discuss different topics along their traineeship period. And also our door here is always open for career advice. We drink a lot of coffee with trainees and also others who are looking for a EU career. And I can just say that I totally agree with what you said about the Renaissance. In recent years, I have seen the number of Swedish trainees in Brussels grow, and many of them are now working in different policy fields, such as energy, single market, defense, AI, in all the institutions, and contributing to what Heike just described of being part of shaping our future policy. So to anyone there in the audience now considering an EU traineeship, I can just say go for it. There's plenty of support available. You heard that from Asia and Erik, both during the application process and later when seeking a temporary position. You also heard the minister today mention in her speech that their government is providing more funding. So it's really a good way you can get a lot of support. So I hope I will meet some of you in the audience here in Brussels. And then to shortly say, some other examples, we are arranging a lot of network events. The Swedish Perm Rep here is the largest foreign mission and an extended arm of the government office in Brussels. So in this way, we can act as an important bridge between Sweden and people working in the EU and the national administrations. So therefore, we regularly organize different types of networking events for Swedes. And I think this is very, very important, meeting each other, sharing experiences, and staying connected. That is crucial. Also, the Swedes working already in the institutions, they are very important also for helping people wanting to start a career, because they can give tips and advice depending on what field they are working in, how to prepare for interview, for example. So this network, I think, is crucial. And then the last thing I want to mention is how we are in dialogue with the EU institutions and EPSO on achieving a better geographical balance. And the lack of geographical balance among EU officials is a problem for Sweden, but also a problem many other member states are facing. And the institutions are aware of this and also, as Erik mentioned, the potential problem of legitimacy it can lead to. And they have started to act. But we think that more needs to be done. So together with other countries, we are pushing for institutions to introduce more structural solutions to deal with this structural problem. And also, we think it's important to improve the entire candidate journey. So we are very glad that the European Parliament recently decided to introduce nationally based selection tests for some member states, and that the Commission now is planning to set concrete targets to achieve better geographical balance. Also, the EPSO competition model has been reformed, and that is a very good beginning. But there is further need for more simplified, understandable, accessible pathways to enter the EU civil service. Because today many applicants feel that the processes are unclear and maybe not so user-friendly and so on. So we are in constant dialogue with institutions on these matters, and also to try to make the processes more transparent and professional. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matilda. I can only support what you are saying by having very much contact with Swedish applicants or Swedes interested in EU careers, that they are very excited about the opportunities, they want to pursue them, but once they read very complex instruction or read about the process that is so unfamiliar to Swedes, then of course many choose not to follow all the steps, because usually they also realize that they not necessarily lead to an employment, or they can take many months in some cases. And then another positive thing, though, that you should remember that you are not alone in this process, because both us at the Swedish Council for Higher Education, Matilda and her colleagues at PermRep, we are going to support you every step of the way and see to it that you succeed, that you get all the necessary information. With that, I would like to maybe think about the future now and try to see what is going to happen ahead, because, okay, Sweden is underrepresented, the world is changing, we are going to need new profiles because it's new priorities, it's defense, competitiveness, it's this clean industrial deal is on the agenda, enlargement, so of course AI is also developing very quickly, and the future staff of even EU institutions is going to be very different in comparison to what it is today. So I have a few questions that you might discuss all together and say what kind of profiles are going to be needed in, let's say, in the nearest future, how institutions are trying to see to it that these profiles are coming from all member states, and also what can Sweden do in order to secure that Swedish expertise is represented at the European Union when it comes to those important issues. Who would like to start?
Okay.
Yeah, Heike, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. A lot of interesting points were already mentioned. We are the profiles will depending on the current political priorities, whether it's going to be defense, whether it's going to be, as I mentioned, digitalization, experts in AI, IT experts in general, whether it's environmental related profiles. So there will be specialist profiles for which we will publish competitions. Competitions are selection procedures to become a civil service in the EU institutions. We will publish these, but we also also need generalist profiles. That meaning anybody who has a university degree of any kind can participate, because one of the big advantages that you can be quite moving and moving around in the EU institutions. You can even change your experience. So we need people who are flexible, agile, and who also continue learning and even might change working from one topic to the other. Having said that, what we are also very much focusing on, and you heard this also by your interventions, we want to improve our outreach, our communication from EPSO's side, from my unit, to the candidates. So to simplify, we want to make our messages clearer. We are in the process of revamping our website to make it easier to navigate, to have a better language, an inclusive language, a jargon-free language, and also to make the information more transparent and easier to digest. Some of the topics we share there are complicated, and it entails also some reading, but we will try to pass on the message easier so that people know whom we are looking for, what are the tasks, and also how you apply, and then what does this whole selection procedure consist of? What kind of tests are we asking you to do? How can you prepare for this? And talking about preparation, that's what you mentioned. We are working very closely with the member states, with national authorities. We have a good collaboration, and I'm sure we are in keeping it with regular meetings, discussing the topics, and listen to your advice also. So it is important that we then improve our outreach. We concentrate our outreach efforts for the moment to the member states that are underrepresented. There are several ones of them, to go to and participate in career events like today, but also to have staff there, our staff or student ambassadors who help us to pass on the messages at university level, at these events, to share a bit their experience, to make it a bit more digestible. What is an EU career? If you have somebody talking to you and giving concrete personal examples, how the person got there, how they made their path into the EU, and what is their daily work or task, what are they looking like. This is much more interesting and explanative than sometimes reading long messages or looking at videos. Nevertheless, you find a whole range of information, videos, testimonials on our EU Careers website, and have a look there. We announce all competitions that are in the planning there. You can sign up with your email address to get automatic notifications so as not to miss something. And we do intend to soon publish a journalist competition at entry level for people who have a university degree, but where no job experience is required. For most other selection procedures we published in the latest years, we always require some experience in the field with several years of experience, so that it always depends, then not everybody who is then coming out of university can apply to that. But there are other ways, I mentioned them. You can work as contractual agent, as a trainee. So there's a lot of information, and we are trying to work on this with this network. We are looking at this geographical balance or imbalance that Matilda mentioned that is existing for the time being, and we try to support those member states with providing them with some statistics, and also we redirect our candidates to the national authorities, the national institutions that help preparing these competitions, that support them. That's very important. You can much better succeed if you know what's coming up, know about the timeline, know about the level of difficulties of tests, and so on. So that is, I think this collaboration is important, and we are improving it and keep that touch. We're also very active on social media. You will hopefully will have seen that or will see it. So we try to share. Every time we publish something, every time we have something to communicate, we publish it, of course, on our EU Careers website, but we also share a lot on our social media channels. So maybe I hope some of you will notice that it's under EU Careers. It's not under the name of the organization. Where it's EU-Careers, and there you see a lot what's happening, and hopefully a better website, more user-friendly, more accessible. That will also encourage people not to stop reading, but then really go ahead and apply. One last word: resilience. I think you mentioned it. I'd like to say that if you don't pass a competition for the first time, that's absolutely normal. Most people, I mean, I'm a good example as well. I tried twice before I was lucky the third attempt. You might have to try several times to get a bit of feeling, what is this competition about? Timing is an issue. You have multiple choice questions where you have a certain amount of questions in a very limited time, so you have to be fast. You have to prepare, that's really important. There are samples on our website, but there is support provided, and that is important, so don't give up. Try it again, and all of us have gone that way, so you are certainly absolutely able to do that as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Heike. And I think we should mention the application that is open now, and also an example of various profiles, building experts and architects. If anyone here has any experience in that, that is your time.
Engineers,
yes,
building,
engineers. Matilda, you wanted to add something. Am I right? No? Erik, do you want to?
Yes, I could
reflect?
just add.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to the 85 competition for sure, and I expect many of you as young students here as well look forward to that. But as you say, I mean, there are an infinite number of profiles and competences needed in the EU institutions. And this is important to understand, and you need to be open and flexible, I think, when it comes to looking for a job in the EU. And Swedish authorities are ready, of course, to give support in many cases. And when it comes to our efforts, I mean the government's efforts, where we would like to see more Swedes, of course the EU priorities of the government are in some way guiding us in where we try to put our emphasis. I mean, we have the war in Ukraine, we have the competitiveness agenda, the fight against cross-border crime, climate action, migration, the rule of law, etc. And these priorities guide us in our work, especially when it comes to seconding experts and so on from the government offices. But I think it's important what you say about the increased awareness in the institutions also of being, you have to be able to move around and look for new opportunities. And this is something actually that we have done also in the government offices. We have just introduced a new EU career program. It's an internal program though, so you have to enter the government offices if you want to take part. The objective here is to strengthen EU competence in the long run, and there is an ambition to promote mobility between different ministries, to the permanent representation in Brussels, to the EU institutions, and so on. And this is the way, because we've seen some deficiency in this kind of work in the government offices up till now, and we think this would be good to safeguard EU competence in the long run. And of course, the other instrument which I talked about before is the new master program with an EU focus that will start in 2026. And will hit full speed in 2027. I think also that's an important way to build EU competence and prepare young academics for a career in the EU institutions. Yeah.
Thank you, Erik. Matilda, do you have any reflections on the matter? And looking ahead, how do you think we can, from our practical side, secure the right profiles coming in? You also work with seconded national experts and national experts in professional training on your level. So can you give some reflections and ideas for improvement?
You know, I think that what was earlier said about EU is such a big place. I mean, there's so many policies being made here, and there's a need of so many different profiles. And I think Heike described that very well in her first part of this panel discussion. And I can just subscribe to what Heike said here about the importance of the work EPSO is doing, and also institutions are doing, about making the EU career pathway more accessible, more transparent, and more user-friendly. And we just, Heike and I, we both participated in a meeting about this earlier this week, or last week, sorry, about candidate journey. And I know that the institutions are planning to develop this process. I think that is very important. But that being said, also to everyone looking for EU career, there is support and there's extremely interesting positions to apply for and to be part of making the policy here in Brussels. But of course, you need to prepare. And I think Heike also mentioned that it is a different entry system than we maybe have in Sweden, where you have tests and selection processes, and you need to prepare. Also, it's always good to have languages. That is always good for a candidate, whatever profile they have. And as a last point, I would say, like, use your network also. Networking is really essential. So, but with that being said, there are many opportunities, and I'm sure that you're also able to find your way, even if it's maybe, it's usually never straight, but it ends here. And welcome to Brussels.
Thank you, Matilda. I have just one short question to all of you. So with one sentence, it's not an easy question, and especially looking back to everything that has already been done, all the intensification efforts on the national government level in Sweden, national action plans from the Commission, and improvements in the HR strategy, and so on, EPSO's new model. What would be one solution or change that you think is the most important to increase, if we say for all member states, geographical balance, and in Sweden to increase representation of Swedes at EU? So if you have one solution that you think is a possibility, let's start with you, Erik.
Well, okay. Well, we follow very closely, of course, the case in the Court of Justice on the nationality-based competitions carried out by the European Parliament, and we have given our support to the EP in this process. And of course, if the Commission would carry out such competitions, I mean, we could easily, I think at least, reduce the deficit among young Swedish administrators in the institutions. So that would be one way, at least, I would say.
Okay, let's hope for nationality-based competitions. We definitely support that. Heike?
Yeah, I will go for the soft measures, as we sometimes call it, because that's what we are doing to continue to raise awareness among young people, like you are, also young, young professionals, to raise awareness, your curiosity, to demystify this sort of opaque EU world, which sometimes it is bureaucratic, but we're trying to get rid of some of this bureaucracy. You heard it this morning, and it's important that it's in the interest of the Swedes to be part of this journey, to make this new legislation to react to all these things that are happening in the world. If you think of defense and migration and war and democracy being questioned, so it's important that Swedish plays part of it in the legislation, but also then in the future, because it's in your own interest, and I'm sure you have so many talented, highly educated people. If you try out, work for Brussels, you don't have to stay there forever. Many of us do, but try it out, and it's really important that you're part of that, and that the Europe of tomorrow is also shaped by the Swedes as all the other member states. That's important.
Oh, thank you. Matilda, what would be one solution or change from you?
Well, I would agree with Heike and Erik and say both the soft measures that has to continue, but really the national-based competition is key, especially for the Nordic countries, where we have done a lot of work with the soft measures, and we see that they are not going to solve the problem where we have underrepresentation that will accelerate due to the projected retirements. I mean, we talked about 30 years of membership. Yes, that also means that people are now retiring soon. That started when Sweden joined EU. So to have a structural solution for a structural problem, the simple answer is national-based competitions, but also agreeing with Heike, soft measures needs to continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope that your ideas might be implemented in the near future. We will see. And I would like to thank you for participating in the panel. Thank you, Matilda. Thank you, Erik. Thank you, Heike. Thank you very much for organizers that we became a part of EU Days Lund program, and especially honorable that we are part of the 5th year of EU Days Lund. Please follow EU Career Sweden, participate in activities that the Swedish Council for Higher Education organizes, take part at our free of charge trainings to prepare for tests. We do them every month online. So as I said, everyone has an opportunity to get support. Meet our EU Career student ambassadors. You will see them by the roll-up EU Careers Sweden. And also after lunch, take part in the workshop EU Careers, EU Career Map workshop. But yes, as my colleagues say here, that we shouldn't forget that we would also like to take questions before we totally say goodbye to you. Are there any questions that came from Menti? Plenty of questions. Okay, that's good. We are still here during lunch, so if you don't get your question answered now, then we will be here today, and Matilda even might join tomorrow if you want to meet her in person. Yes, please. Okay, I think the question, Matilda, you might not have heard. What are the benefits of working in the EU compared to Sweden, pensions, sick leave, and so on? I want to refer you to the workshop tomorrow where Cecilia and Pernilla would actually answer this question. And if you really want to, on EPSO's webpage, there is a lot of information, right, under how to work at EU or something, where you can read more about childcare, insurance, and everything. Yeah. Hmm?
What career opportunities are there for more experienced people?
Yes, career opportunities for more experienced people. Heike, maybe a question to you.
Yeah. so for somebody who is a specialist in the field, there are two pathways basically. You can become really increase your specialty, your expertise in a certain field, and become a counselor, a senior advisor. And then there's the other side, is also to go take the management path. So when you start, you usually start as a policy officer or working in a certain area. But then a lot of my colleagues, and that was also a bit my case, you have the possibility to become a team leader, then to go up to head of sector or become a deputy, head of unit, and then you can go to senior management. All this takes a long while. It's not done quickly. It includes also promotions and competition in-house. But there are big possibilities, and you have horizontal possibilities that you change from one area of expertise even to another. That is quite special.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any patterns in the applications by Swedish nationals wanting to pursue an EU career that could explain the lack of Swedes in the EU?
Yes, patterns. I can answer that actually, that we have very often many applying, but then usually those that apply, they don't read instructions, notice of competition. So once they receive a mail that congratulations, you have applied, then they start reading the instructions and realize that they actually signed up for a long and complicated process where they need to prepare. So that's number one. Number two is usually people that come to the tests, they do not prepare for tests, so then their performance is unfortunately quite low. And even though they participate in our training, as our coaches say, that you have to prepare at least 1 hour per day in the course of 1 to 2 months. So you have to take this preparation seriously, and usually those that take the test, they say, well, I started preparing during the weekend before the test. So of course that doesn't fly if you want to succeed, and if you're competing with sometimes several thousand applicants from all across Europe. And then the third one is maybe the whole testing system is not so usual for Sweden, and those written tests, multiple question tests, and even the next stage, if we're talking about direct recruitment, interviews are not at all like interviews in Sweden. They are special types of interviews, so preparation is very important. And I don't know, Matilda, if you can add anything when it comes to direct recruitments. Are there any patterns? Why do Swedes not succeed?
No, I'm sorry, I cannot say this. I meet so many different candidates, but I don't have the overall pictures. I cannot talk about patterns, but I just also echo what you said about preparation, and that is true for young people seeking traineeships, but it's also true for very experienced persons seeking high management positions. So it is a different culture or a tradition when it comes to the selection processes that we are not very used to in the Nordic countries, and also I think Netherlands would be also similar, have the similar background as we. But this is just something that you have to, prepare for and take it seriously. Just start in time, and then I mean, when Swedish candidates do prepare, they really excel. And one example maybe I could say is that the government sponsoring more scholarships for College of Europe led to, first there were like maybe 2 students, and then there were more scholarships, so more applied. So there were 10 last year. And those 10, they were very engaged, and they started a group with the Nordic Baltic students, and they offered to help students seeking the next scholarships. So I think that is also part of the success story. Of course, that there are more scholarships, but that they helped them to prepare, and they realized that they really needed to prepare also for an interview to apply for College of Europe. You have to prepare. And I think that is also part of why we now see 20 that were accepted, and then 17 that started to study. Thank you.
Thank you, Matilda. And Heike, I think maybe we're also saying so much pattern for Swedes, but I guess maybe it's a pattern for more than just Swedes. And do you have anything to add on this matter?
I want to stress one point you mentioned, and that's more important than one might think. I always call it the first test in our competitions is that whenever you apply to selection procedure, it's published in a notice of competition. This exists in 24 languages. It's a legal document, not easy to read, quite long, but it's the legal basis of the competition. And we always tell candidates, please read this. It has so much information there of a whole process, all the criteria, eligibility, tasks, examples of tasks. Read it, even if it's a heavy read, but that will avoid that you miss a lot of points. And then we also have for each competition on our website guidelines and information about technical requirements. Our tests are all online. You need to read the technical requirements that you can do a prerequisite test so that to check out if your IT requirement fits. And please read this. If candidates, often they fly over this, they miss crucial information, and then when the tests take place, they don't manage, they're out, they can't log in or whatever. So please read the information. We're trying to make it more user-friendly, but it is also sometimes important with technical details, and that is, I always call the first test. Read it, otherwise you will not pass the first phase already for the multiple choice questions. That is my advice.
Thank you. I think if we don't take too much time of lunch, let's take one last question and then we will wrap it up.
One final question then. I think this is relevant for many people in Lund since it's a very international city. How far does the requirement for an EU citizenship go in seeking opportunities within the EU institutions?
Yeah. So for all the careers, for contract agents, temporary agents, civil servants, you have to have the nationality of one of the EU member states. The only exception are the traineeships. For traineeships, I think in all the institutions, you do not need to have the nationality. There's a certain quota for people with worldwide nationalities, let's say. But for a career in the EU institutions, you need to have the nationality of one of the member states, whichever. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. I think with that we will close our session. If you have any more questions to us, find us during lunch. Go talk to student ambassadors. Heike, you have a colleague, Amy, with you that would lead the workshop after lunch.
Yeah.
There she is. So please come and ask more questions. Otherwise, you can always get in touch with me by EU Career Sweden, LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook, or you can just mail us, and you can find more information at uhr.se/EU Career Sweden. That's where you find most information. Or if you don't speak Swedish, EPSO's webpage, it's
EU-careers and then europa.eu.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for staying with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
några sista komma in här kanske innan vi... Ladies and gentlemen, very welcome back and very welcome to this panel discussion on EU enlargement, geopolitics, challenges and opportunities in a changing world. My name is Göran von Sydow. I'm the director of SIEPS, the Swedish Institute for European Policy Studies, and we are very happy to organize this panel within the context of Lund EU Days. And at this panel, we will talk about EU enlargement from various angles. And as we heard this morning from the Minister of EU Affairs, EU enlargement is back on the EU agenda after having been absent for, well, at least a decade or so, due to limited progress in candidate countries, but also perhaps to some extent to limited appetite within EU member states to pursue enlargement again. And it is back, as the Minister said, that only days after the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 22, Ukraine filed its membership application. And from the Ukrainian side, it's been seen as very important that there is a rapprochement towards the European Union and that there is a membership perspective given the security situation. That in turn has led to a renewed discussion about enlargement as such, about the transformative power of enlargement and how one could advance that not only to Ukraine and Moldova, but also to the countries on the Western Balkan. Which gives a perspective that the EU is set again to enlarge. Not to say that this will be easy or a quick process, but nonetheless, it is now moving forward. And it's moving forward in a sense, in a logic that it's somewhat different than previous rounds of enlargement. If we compare, for instance, the 2000s and the Big Bang enlargement, it was first done, as I said, as a Big Bang, as a major leap, but it was also perceived as a transformative moment. So the logic behind enlargement was that of transforming those states set to become members of the EU. This time around, as terms of the sequencing, we are rather talking about, applying to one-by-one case logic to applicant countries. That is not necessarily going to be one big enlargement. And secondly, the framing is very much done in a geopolitical sense. That geopolitical sense, it also gives a certain urgency to the matter, to advance quickly. And that is, of course, particularly the case with Ukraine. And we will talk about this in this panel. I'm very happy to have four extremely qualified speakers with me here today to help us guide through this discussion. To the right, from my side at least, we find Peter Lundberg, who is Executive Director of the Raoul Wallenberg Institute of Human Rights and Humanitarian Law here at Lund. And he has a long experience also working in various fields in international cooperation and aid, etc. Next to him, Clara Lindström from the Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies at the UI, the International Affairs Institute in Stockholm, who's working extensively on EU enlargement in that context. Katarina Areskog, she's from Impact Europe, and she's also a member of the Advisory Council here at the Lund EU Days, and has held many roles, including that of State Secretary for EU Affairs, working for the European Commission, etc. And here we have Richard Bengtsson, known to many of the students here in Lund, I'm sure. He is an associate professor at the Department of Political Science here at Lund University and has done quite a bit of research on EU enlargement and also the external role of the European Union. So I'm very happy to have all of you here with me today. And as in the previous panels, you would notice that there is the Mentimeter code. So please send your questions and I will keep track of them here. Should you have any question, because they are extremely knowledgeable, these people. So, but maybe stay to the topic, but nonetheless, feel free to post those questions. So we will do this as a panel discussion, and my first question to all of the panelists will be to first give them the chance to give the overview, the picture of where we are in EU enlargement today, and perhaps also to add in your capacities what are the specific roles in which you play in various ways within the process of EU enlargement. Can we start with you, Peter?
Thank you very much, Göran, and very nice to be here with all of you this afternoon. It's an extraordinary, interesting, and also complex question, but let me start maybe where the Finnish ambassador in the previous session made a very interesting remark. From the Finnish point of view, it's really about security and values. And I think the point here, as a human rights academic institute at the Raoul Wallenberg is, of course, it's the values that is the core from our point of view to address this. It's about the fundamental rights. It is about upholding the norms and the standards of what the European Union is supposed to be all about. It's to ensure that we have the rule of law and that we have societies that are sound and balanced and can actually work according to democratic systems and so on. And there, the accession process becomes a key question. Is it a security element? Then we should bring in the new member states tomorrow. But if it's about the values, then we need to stop and we need to reflect. And in my previous job before joining the Raoul Wallenberg Institute, I used to be the UN resident coordinator to Montenegro. And as you know, Montenegro is the so-called front runner of the whole accession process. But they have been working now for 12 years or 13 years in circles. And it's circling especially around one of the acquis, and that is Chapter 23. Chapter 23 is really about rule of law, independence of institutions, the fight against corruption, and ensuring that human rights is there for everybody. And I think this, for us, as the Raoul Wallenberg Institute, we see this as a red thread in the whole accession process. And that's why we have engaged now in Ukraine, because we know that Ukraine have a very similar challenge to overcome. We just saw this summer some of the legislation that went a little bit like a ping-pong game regarding the fight against corruption and what are the norms and the trends. So I would say in many ways the jury is out there, and I think it is very important for all the member states to stay the course. Everybody wants to be flexible, everybody wants to find solutions, but these fundamental norms and values, they are there for a reason. That's why this whole project was created, not only as a peace project, but also to ensure that these values stays. So I think that is the entry point we come from. So we focus very narrowly in the accession journey on Chapter 23, and we want to do that also in other countries like in Moldova, and of course to continue to support Western Balkans on that journey. And I didn't forget about Turkey. Of course, that is also part of the game. So I stopped there to begin.
Thank you so much, Peter. Clara.
Thank you. I will focus mostly on Ukraine in my remarks. In terms of where we are, there's a Swedish expression of bollen är I rullning. The ball has started to roll. So the process is on. It's happening. And that is something that we perhaps don't think about so often when we read the news. But hundreds, thousands of people are working on Ukraine's EU accession process every day, tirelessly, both within Ukraine, civil servants, civil society, but also in Brussels. At the DJ Ines, the part of the commission that is working on Ukraine's accession, a couple of years ago, no one or a handful, now there are over 100 civil servants doing this every day. And Katarina, I know that you will also mention about the screenings and all the processes that are happening. And in the end of the day, EU accession is not only a negotiation in Brussels, it's about the implementation of reforms at local and regional level. So in terms of where we are there, also local leaders at different levels of administration in Ukraine working every day on implementing reforms, on having projects with European partners for the further EU integration. as part of the victory. At the same time, and we will get into this, even though the process is moving and it's happening, there are blockages to the process. So formally, we still haven't opened the first accession negotiation cluster for Ukraine, which is a big problem. In a way, the longer the process goes on informally and the more work is done, but on the other hand, there are no formal steps in the negotiation process. That becomes a problem, of course. In terms of my role, or perhaps the role of my function, it can be a bridge there in the difficulty of the political blockages, because there's quite a lot of frustration about what to do with this. It's a difficult question, it's a dilemma. So that's where I come in as an analyst, an expert and a policy shaper, along with my colleagues, of bringing creative solutions, pushing the agenda, sometimes thinking out of the box. I mean, we don't have a box no longer. It's a geopolitical reality that Europe has never faced before. And also about bringing people together. So one of the more exciting projects, I think, that SEVS, which is how you pronounce the acronym of my center, by the way, SEVS, is with funding from SIDA and from the EU delegation, opening a European think tank office in Kiev, which we think is an important addition to bringing Ukrainian experts and other experts from the region together with their counterparts from EU member states to make policy recommendations, to deal with difficult questions, to think creatively and out of the no longer existing box.
Great. Thank you so much, Clara. Katarina, what do you see?
Thank you. Well, I think it's interesting to see how enlargement has gone from being a bit out of fashion to now being again one of the most important policy objectives of the EU. After the fall of the wall, when Sweden joined in '95, I mean, the hottest topic you could work with end of the 90s was enlargement, because then you were preparing for the Central and Eastern European countries for the Big Bang in 2004 to help them become EU members. And then you had Romania, Bulgaria, you had Croatia, but it kind of lost momentum after there. Of course, we had a financial crisis, we had Brexit and so on. But now again, with the geopolitics, as you say, Göran, and we see, of course, the Russian invasion in Ukraine, Moldova and Ukraine, the enlargement for those countries becomes so important and urgent for our own defense and security. And also with the US not being interested any longer in Europe, you have the Western Balkans, we have to take care of that ourselves. Stability becomes a key factor. So I would say geopolitics, very much the external aspects that have an impact on enlargement process within the EU. But then I would also add economy and competitiveness. We tend to forget that when we see Ukraine, that Trump didn't forget it actually with his trials to get mineral agreements, but Ukraine has fantastic resources when it comes to critical raw materials. The world's largest reserves in graphite, in lithium, among the world's largest, not the largest, but also when it comes to nuclear fuel, uranium. So there's a lot of economy and competitiveness, and also, of course, enlarging the internal market to compete with the US and China. And to finish off, you have geopolitics, you have competitiveness, but you have also regionalization, strategic autonomy, you have resilience. So the EU needs to build up their own strength again in a world of regions. So to conclude, I think there's different aspects that makes enlargement very important again for the EU.
Could you also, I mean, I know you are also engaged in certain tasks when it comes to Ukraine and their path to the EU membership. That is a high-level group with helping Ukraine. Could you please elaborate a little bit? What do you do in practice?
The Minister for Foreign Affairs, Tobias Billström, he appointed a Nordic-Baltic group, and I take part in that together with Cecilia Malmström, and we have former commissioners from Lithuania and Latvia, former minister for environment from Denmark. So we actually go to Kiev. We went there last summer, and we're going now again this autumn to help those that are preparing for the negotiations. And as Clara said, the screening, which is the preparation for the negotiations, are done for 5 out of 6 clusters, but they haven't started negotiating, and we will discuss that. I'm sure Hungary is blocking the negotiations to start for Ukraine, but we are helping and trying to be advisors how they should proceed, how they should prepare themselves.
We can perhaps come back to that also, your assessment of how things are actually moving in that respect during this process. But perhaps first, Richard, to let you in on this big sort of question to begin with.
Well, thank you very much, Johan. And I thought I would begin by taking up what you pointed to in terms of the geopolitical dynamics, something fundamentally new, Russia's full-scale invasion as, in an ironic sense, also the catalyst of what we see now. But at the same time, we should remember, I think, that there has been a geopolitical dimension also to previous enlargements. The 1995 enlargement, including Sweden then, but also, of course, the 2004, 7, and so on, sort of reunification of Europe. So there is an element of that in the background, but at the same time, it is a fundamentally new situation. And what becomes important then is the sort of tension between an idea that has sort of defined previous enlargements in terms of a merits-based approach to membership. Countries are allowed into the EU once they fulfill a number of criteria and have negotiated the terms of entry, so to say. That logic versus what we now hear a lot about, namely a sort of geopolitical logic that, not least in the case of Ukraine, it's important to anchor Ukraine quickly. They want that, and we need that, all of us, for European security. And there is a tension between these two dynamics or logics. And a lot of discussions now going on about so-called gradual integration or phasing in and so on and so forth, which would sort of make the idea of the clear-cut membership, meaning then outside or inside, that idea of a clear-cut membership becomes blurred. And there are a number of creative ways of dealing with that kind of spectrum of alternatives then. But at the same time, that questions all along the issue of the exclusivity of membership. So different political dynamics, and it becomes a matter also of political will at the end of the day, how European leaders, European governments want to play out this sort of, in a sense, dilemma of how to move on.
Great. Maybe we could take that point, your first point on this geopolitics versus the merit-based, because that's also what you're working on, Katarina, for instance, and you already touched upon it, really, you know, the idea that the previous enlargement round has learned us a little bit of how to go about enlargement, essentially meaning that what we've seen post-enlargement from the 2004 in specific cases is that once members, it's harder, much harder for the EU to use this kind of transformative power logic over member states once they're in. So in the enlargement phase, it's high. You can influence incoming member states to adjust, adapt to the EU, but once inside, it becomes harder. That has led, for instance, to an increased focus on issues of the rule of law, on corruption, etc. All of this has then led to, you know, emphasizing the merit-based approach that the candidate countries, they really have to live. But as Richard pointed out, isn't there a tension about the need for speed as the geopolitics surrounding it? So my question to you would be really to think a little bit, how can one square that? How can we solve the dilemma that Richard has pointed to us? Do you have any good suggestions on this, Peter?
I won't claim that I have a solution, but I mean, it's unavoidable to look at the, I believe, French and perhaps a few others countries' idea of having this graduation process towards the EU. Because if you imagine there is a graduation process where category A has everything and they are fulfilling all the values, and they are, as many member states were telling us when I was with the UN, we don't want any half-baked democracies to join the UN. We want fully baked democracies. So let's imagine that the fully baked democracies are in the category A. Then it doesn't prevent you for security reasons to immediately get someone in category C or B or whatever you want to call it. So I mean, you might find a way to not throw the baby with the bathwater. I'm not an expert on this, but I'm just saying that if we start to compromise on the values for geopolitical security concerns, the risk is that we will, have a problem down the road that might not only affect those countries, but everyone in the whole European Union, because we can see it already today. I mean, there is a lot of member states that are very, have a relativistic view on the fundamental values. And I think that this is, there is a short-sighted victory with maybe very long-term consequences for the union as such. But again, I'm not saying that I have a solution, but I think it's important.
Clara, you've been traveling a lot and looking at it from the Ukrainian point of view to talk about that case. Do you think it would be acceptable or an appetite for a membership light that is in view of this, the gradual process that you can get only this, but not the whole bit because you're not ready yet?
Well, I think the Ukrainians have learned the hard way the fundamental difference between a special solution and full membership. So from the Ukrainian perspective, it's full membership, what should be the target and what this process is about. That said, on the way there can be concrete results that make a difference for citizens and in their everyday life. So when we are discussing gradual integration in terms of access to certain programs, for youth mobility, for employment opportunities, for more favorable trading conditions, of course Ukraine is all in favor of that. But it can never be seen as a replacement or as a way to postpone the process of actual membership.
Katarina.
Yeah, no, I think that you point at the problems, because it can never be a second-class membership. If you should, even though I think it's a great idea, but to be there was this French-German expert group who made a 4-tier proposal. So you have the inner circle where you have Eurozone, you have Schengen membership, you're a member of everything. Then you have the normal EU, including Sweden, who is not part of the Eurozone. Then you have associated members, and then the 4th tier is the political community, where you have political cooperation, but not the rest. And I think this associated membership, if you make it really attractive, with full participation in programs, access to the internal market, and so on, and maybe tie it to a deadline when you become members. So it's on the way to membership, because I think the fear is that, okay, we never came further. We became associated members and that's it. So you have to have, I think, a clear end goal and then make it really attractive. And then you create leverage also, because you can put a lot of demands on the associated members. That's also rule of law and so on. So it's a good way to not have nothing or everything. You have on the way to membership, you have a good post.
Yes, Richard.
Yeah, I would agree in general with what has been said. I just wanted to add that we focus a lot on Ukraine and to an extent Moldova for good reasons, but we also have the Western Balkan countries. We have to keep them in mind, and they have been in this process for, should we say, 20 years in one way or another. From the promise from the EU side in 2003 that the Western Balkan countries belong inside the EU to the extent that they want to. And in that perspective, there have been many obstacles on the road toward membership. So what is happening now is that the process in totality has new energy because of Ukraine and Moldova. But I would be surprised if the Western Balkan countries will not ask for the same kind of approach that Ukraine and Moldova get.
It's very hard to not to have equal treatment in that sense from the side of the EU, right? Peter?
No, I just wanted to come back to that Western Balkan perspective, because I think the reality is that it's backsliding and people are losing hope. They're losing perspective. You don't have those 80% of the population who is pro-European. They're saying, what's happening? Because of 20 years or 15 years of lingering processes where you're waiting for Godot, because you can't really reach those benchmarks. So I think, I mean, either you wait and see, and then you see how pro-Russian, anti-EU sentiments grows. Look at Serbia. I mean, look at Bosnia-Herzegovina. Montenegro is also a good example, who is on the verge, but never close enough. So we focus on Ukraine and Moldova, but there is this perspective that we have to take into consideration. So something needs to happen, and because I don't think it can just wait forever and ever.
No, I agree with that, and I think we become a bit lazy. We take for granted that everybody wants to become EU member, and we also need to make it attractive for the countries, so we don't have, like Georgia or Serbia, we have an opinion because others will take the other position and very successfully say that this is not for you, you should choose another way. So we need to communicate and market the membership.
So I introduced this panel by saying that enlargement is back since the Russian full-scale invasion, but in fact this is not entirely true. I think it was even before that from European leaders you saw that the lack of an enlargement perspective in the Western Balkans increasingly led to other geopolitical actors moving in, and therefore sort of keeping them in their zones of interest rather than in the European. But Clara, you wanted to jump on this.
Well, I wanted to add, going back to the first question you asked for this round, Göran, how enlargement is often framed as it's either geopolitics or merit-based. I think that framing can be problematic in that, in a way, it conveys that it's an either-or. But when I interact with Ukrainians, for example, they see it as, yes, it's incredibly urgent, we're waging a full-scale war for our existence, hence, we have this huge political will to really implement reforms. We have all these roadmaps, we're doing this and this and this, it's part of the victory. So they're not saying, let's skip the merit-based. They're saying, let's do it, but at a faster pace and with more political will. And that approach is something I would like to transfer to Brussels. Not saying, oh, it's so difficult. Should we do geopolitics or should we do merit-based? No, it's about doing the merit-based, but with stronger political will and more urgency.
I have a question here from the Menti, and it relates a little bit to this, and I read it. What is done by the EU to overcome Ukraine's issues on frail democratic institutions and a history of corruption in both fiscal and political spheres? How can Ukraine's democratic resilience be strengthened? And I guess it relates to that fear, perhaps, by some that we have this experience from previous rounds, and also the understanding of what it looks like. So how, in a situation of war, can one simultaneously work towards strengthening those institutions? And Peter, I think.
I think the first thing you need to take a step from is it takes time. It's not a quick fix. This is countries that has been, struggling with endemic corruption for as long as we can remember. It takes time. It's a mindset. I would say it's a generational shift. So we are part of Team Sweden, and we are working with NB8, and we are supporting this initiative that the Swedish government took. And we are working with the chief negotiator and the Minister of Justice, with all of these actors, because we want to be the lubricant in the machine. So when Katarina and others, Cecilia, comes and give strategic advice, something needs to happen in between. But I think what we realize is that it needs to be given time to, to grow, in a robust way, because this is not a quick fix. We can be fast, but it's not a quick fix, because it really needs to get, sucked into the whole system. Because even if we can have legislation in place, even if we could have institutions in place, it's going to be about how is it being implemented, and not only in Kiev, but actually in the oblast at local level. So we need to see in the EU office in Lviv how this is actually translating into something on a daily basis to ensure what we are focusing on: fundamental rights, the independence of institutions, and how the battle against corruption is real and not something only theoretical. So I think time is of essence.
Katarina, you want to?
Also, there are two things throughout the negotiation process: the cluster of the fundamentals, the rule of law, democracy, fundamental values. That is the cluster that is opened first in the negotiations, and you can always go back on it and open it up again, even though if you close the chapters, if there's a backlash in Ukraine, let's say they do something that was not expected, or they break the promises they've given, and so on. So there is a safeguard in the accession process. The problem is, of course, afterwards, also when they become a member, what do you do then? And there we have some examples. For example, Bulgaria and Romania didn't become members of Schengen, so you can have leverage even after countries have become members. And then we have also the budgetary conditionality that is strengthened for existing member states. So it's not perfect, but there are a couple of safeguards if a country go backwards.
And it's now also the methodology is reversible, as you said, which is also a new element that one can reverse. But it relates to another question that came in from one of you. When enlarging, adding new member states, how do we, quote unquote, avoid a new Hungary? So, because I guess that's also part of why many member states nowadays feel a bit the need to be very rigorous in these elements. So what's your answer? You've already touched upon a few, of course. Clara, what's...
Well, I guess the two most recent questions are quite interlinked. In the context of Ukraine, it's about what kind of country will Ukraine be when it joins the European Union. And just going back to re-emphasize what you said, that it's about the implementation of reforms at local and regional level. And so I would say that the key best way for the European Union to support Ukraine's reform path is to ensure that it has a credible membership perspective, so that that is still a realizable goal, that forces for reform in Ukraine have political leverage to continue on the reforms, to have a carrot, so to speak. But that links me to the sticks, because conditionality is key in this. In the context of Ukraine, the United States played a very important role in terms of funding different anti-corruption efforts, anti-corruption organizations in civil society. They also played an important role in being quite tough in its rhetoric when things were not going in the right direction. Now we see no USAID money, and also not those tough American voices. So here there's a gap that the EU really needs to step in and fill, both when it comes to financing, but also with the rhetoric that the EU is not as used to. But it really needs to play the bad cop when that is called for. And that's what all my Ukrainian colleagues and counterparts say. You need to use constructive criticism and be tough when necessary.
One other question that came in, thanks a lot for helping me here, is from one of you saying, can countries participate on a level playing field in the single market without fulfilling the fundamentals? Maybe that's for you, Katarina. So how important are the fundamentals? Because sometimes when we talk about this flexible integration, multi-level EU, we think, okay, maybe the single market, that can be separated from other parts of, as Peter indicated, so this kind of geometric, variable geometry. That's one way of looking at it, because, I mean, from the enlargement, from the candidate countries, I mean, they normally were very interested in joining the single market. They want the access to the market. But can they? Unless the fundamentals, the values and the rule of law are met.
Well, I was going to say no, but yes, because you have Norway. I mean, they're only part of the internal market. They don't know.
Don't say they don't fulfill.
Exactly. I was going to say we don't have a problem there, but in theory you can have another Norway that do not fulfill the fundamentals. But otherwise, if we don't think about Norway, we think about the current enlargement process. You can't become a member. You can't become a member without fulfilling the fundamentals. That is, I mean, it's been strengthened since 2020. The new enlargement framework, the fundamentals, as we said before, always have to be fulfilled, and if they backtrack, you open it up again. So for the current enlargement wave, you have to abide by the fundamentals.
I thought we would also turn a little bit back to security that many of you have touched upon. And one question that came from the audience is, how does the panel see the status with territorial integrity issues, Ukraine, Moldova, when joining the EU? And perhaps if I can add to that, because with this geopolitical framing, it is often stated from EU leaders that the perspective of, particularly for Ukraine, of an EU membership, it also includes some kind of security guarantee. And as we know, or how I think most of us read the current situation, is that NATO membership for Ukraine is not really on the agenda, whereas the process towards EU membership is. Would then the EU become a security guarantee for Ukraine? And what would that mean to the European Union? Any takers on this? Richard?
It's a tough question, I think, and it has to do with many things, but one being that a security guarantee can be actually many different things. And maybe some of you noticed in von der Leyen's State of the Union speech, she spoke of this, of a security guarantee for Ukraine would be a security guarantee for all of the EU, and so on and so forth. There is rhetoric here, but in terms of action, I think it's a really tricky question, and it has to do partly with territorial questions, but at the same time we could say we have Cyprus in the EU with a territorial situation, and we have a number of, let's say, steps on a process or missed opportunities maybe for dealing with that, and still there is membership for Cyprus. Of course, you would not want to import an ongoing conflict, but if we think more in terms of frozen conflicts and security in a broader sense than territorial defense, there may be something in here to think further about. I think I stop there for now.
Any others on the security side?
Well, I can go back to the territorial integrity part. I think for sure it will need an individual solution for each of these countries. That's really, unfortunately, the reality. And what it boils down to is perhaps something like Cyprus, but that will have to take into account the specific conditions on the ground for each candidate state. But it could look like something of de jure. It applies to the whole candidate country when joining the internal market, EU acquis, but then de facto it will be a gradual rollout, for example. So yes, that will be a question to take into account, but it's not something that hinders, per se, accession. When it comes to security, yes, definitely. I mean, I think this enlargement wave really faces us with the difficult and fundamental question of what Article 42.7 means. Which, if you would just read it, and I know you have said this as well, Göran, in words, it could be stronger than NATO's Article 5. Which, of course, it is not, because it's not about the words, it's about the military capabilities that you have as a credible deterrent to back it up with. But who knows? I mean, we live in a very dynamic geopolitical time, and a new Europe might come out of this enlargement too.
You wanted to jump in here as well, Katarina.
No, just to say, I agree with Clara. You can have frozen conflicts. You have to have tailor-made solutions for each country, but that could be taken care of in the accession treaty. But when it comes to security guarantees, I think the paragraphs, they don't matter. Without the US, there's no security guarantee. I mean, Europe, let's face it, we have to be honest, we cannot guarantee anything. We don't have the military capability. Sorry to say, I only represent myself, so I can say that. But, you know, we're completely dependent for, you know, some kind of Russian or Ukraine agreement for Russia, for the US to be part of that.
But you can also look from European integration history, you could also say that it is indeed a cooperation that develops over time and normally in harmony with the kind of challenges, and that this presence of Article 42.7, despite the fact that it's not matched by sort of the leadership structures behind it, it could be filled with something.
I was only talking about the current situation, but future.
Could I add a finger there, actually, because that's yet another argument for why we really need the Ukrainians. As I mentioned before lunch as well, I mean, the experience and skills of these soldiers and officers and their way of understanding modern warfare. I mean, we need them as security providers for us.
I think you answered the question, which is here in the Menti. How can Ukraine's EU integration strengthen the EU's security and global influence? I think you gave the answer, at least a positive account, Peter.
I just wanted to, I had a privilege to go to Moldova last week, and it was interesting to ask the diplomats just to understand how do they see its election this weekend, and you know, where do they see the biggest challenges. And I assumed it's Transnistria, and it's the kind of what is going to happen with that elephant in their room, you know, for a membership. But for them it was very clear that a membership would rather... They believe that Transnistria will diffuse itself. There is very few actual Russian troops there. They're getting older, they can't change them. And they said that an EU membership there would probably have a transformative impact, and that is issue. But their concern was more on the fundamentals. How can Moldova actually qualify? Then this is a second. I thought it was the other way around. I thought it was this geopolitical, territorial issue that was the big problem, and the rest could be. But the way they explained it, it was actually the other way around.
Maybe now we're getting closer to the end of this panel, but perhaps also one element is we are talking about the progress and how it can be advanced. But if you look at the EU side, at one point or another, any new member states will have to be accepted by all EU member states. So when you think about that perspective, do you think it's likely, for political reasons also? I mean, we're in a context in Sweden where public support is very high for enlargement, political support. This is not necessarily the case in many other capitals or member states. So the EU internal side, if we could bring that, or the member state perspective, do you really think the way things are moving that we will get acceptance for further enlargement?
I'm not so sure, to be honest. And at least it will require some kind of communicative acts from political leaders to explain to the public in existing member countries why this is so important. I noticed earlier in the spring of this year there was a so-called Eurobarometer public opinion survey, which is done repeatedly, and it was specifically on the opinion about enlargement. And it is to be noted then that Swedish public opinion is the highest in terms of support for enlargement. Some 80% of the Swedish respondents are in favor or very much in favor of enlargement. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, we have the French public with some 40% in favor. So there is variation within the EU. There is also variation in terms of the different candidate countries, with somewhat more support, but not surprisingly marginal difference still, but somewhat more support for Ukraine compared to the other 8 or 9 countries. So domestic politics is very important to keep in mind here. Yeah,
Katarina.
No, I agree. I think there are a couple of countries where it's doubtful how they would vote in the Council on an accession treaty for Ukraine or any other country. But I also wanted to point out that we have created a situation of unanimity in the case of Ukraine, not only when it comes to the accession treaty, but for opening every chapter of negotiation and for closing. We have created since 2020 a new framework which demands unanimity. So it's not only the accession treaty, but there are so many possibilities.
It's the method which lots of veto.
Yes,
veto
lots
points.
of veto.
Yeah.
So it's like a minefield,
It's a minefield.
path.
Yes, I agree, which is a reason for perhaps seriously thinking about revising the methodology. But as to the political will, I think it can be concerning to think about, we have the first tier of vocal opponents. In the case of Ukraine, it's Hungary. We have other countries that have problems with some in the Western Balkans. But the perhaps more interesting and even more problematic in the long term is sort of the second tier of resistors. And there you have France and Poland with strong agricultural lobbies. You might find the Netherlands there. And I think to deal with this second tier of resistors that can be convinced, we really need to win the social and economic arguments when it comes to enlargement. Because political priorities will be different, security, threat perceptions differ depending on geographical location, but we're all interested in prosperity. And all political leaders are interested in winning elections to be popular among their voters. So that's the narrative about enlargement, to see it as a prosperity project that I think we need to push to ensure the political will.
Peter, do you want to add?
I would like to go back maybe to those perception studies in the Western Balkans, especially in Montenegro, where 80% of the population are all in favor of joining the EU. But when you start to ask them questions on values, it's very close to the Serb Orthodox Church. It goes very back towards what you would say is a Russian narrative of values and traditions and views on human rights and equality, on these type of elements in society. So there is a drive for the economic part of the European Union. It's the job opportunity, it's a better standard of living, but not necessarily the other part of the package. That's a challenge for the political reality to convince citizens in Europe, unless we solve that one.
Which is a general challenge of the EU as well. It's a package deal. It's hard to pick only the things you like and neglect the others. I think I kind of picked a lot of things I liked in this panel. It's been great, and I think we learned a lot. Time flies when you're having fun. If I can take the opportunity to make a little public announcement, you should consult our CEP's website to find lots of studies in this area of enlargement. And also, as Clara mentioned, the money issue. I think there is a panel on the next multi-annual financial framework later on, which of course also is a very important political situation for the EU, how to afford future enlargement as well. With that said, I want to thank all of you for helping me with questions, for listening carefully, and most of all the panelists, that you've done a great job. So thanks to you. Thank you. If I'm not ill-informed, there is now coffee break and then new interesting seminars. So enjoy.
Ja, hej och välkomna alla här i rummet och alla ni som tittar digitalt. Mitt namn är Per Johansson och jag är chef för Europaparlamentets kontor i Sverige. My name is Per Johansson and I'm the head of the European Parliament office in Sweden. And I would like to say a big welcome to all of you here in the room and also everyone who's watching on screens to this very, very interesting seminar about the political challenges facing the next long-term budget of the EU. And this is something that we have started to discuss. The Commission has put the proposals forward, and now it is going to be discussed by the European Parliament and the Member States in Council. So we have an exciting time ahead of us. And with no further ado, I will hand you over to your moderator, Maria.
Thank you. Yes, and the microphone is on, and I'm very happy to be here with you to discuss the EU's long-term budget, because that's, of course, one of the most important things in any political context, what you do with the taxpayers' money that you have. So, and to help me with this, I have Lena Ek, who is a former member of the European Parliament for the Centre Party, and Johan Wult, who is the head of communication at the European Commission Representation in Sweden. And do we have someone on screen as well? Or was that just a myth? No, not a myth. No, a real person on screen. But she's real, and she's there in real time. And that's Helene Fritzon, who is a member of the European Parliament for the Social Democrats. So welcome, Helene. So very nice to have all of you here. And I will start with an opening question, and you can elaborate for 1, 2, 3 minutes max on that. And that is that we have a situation in Europe with war, climate crisis, trade conflicts, weakened economic outlook, eroded competitiveness. Is this now the time to expand cooperation and invest ambitiously in the future? So, related to the budget. And I will start with you here on the stage. Lena, Johan. Okay, Johan.
Okay, yes,
I think Johan is prepared to start.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Maria, and very nice to see so many here. I was a bit afraid that people wouldn't listen to a discussion about the budget. But it's true, as Maria said, that of course the budget is central in order to be able to implement and to realize the policy initiatives and ambitions that we have on an EU level, and that has actually been requested from the member states to remind a little bit about the origin of this budget. Before the current Commission came into mandate, there was a strategic agenda written by the member states where they clearly explain what they expect the Commission to do. And anyway, this long-term budget that will come into place in 2028 will finance basically these ambitions. And this summer, the Commission presented a proposal for the budget, and it reflects very much what we have discussed here today. It reflects our ambitions to increase security in the EU, to protect Ukraine, to increase competitiveness, which means to increase spending in investments and infrastructure. It's everything from AI to supercomputers, to energy infrastructure, to roads, to LNG terminals. There's a lot of things which needs to be built in order to secure the transition to a green future, but also to increase our competitiveness. That's one thing. And then, of course, we also need money to prepare the enlargement countries. I've been listening to the speakers during the whole day, and I can hear that there is a strong support for enlargement. If we look at the Eurobarometer, there is a strong support also from the citizens, not least the citizens in Sweden, for an enlargement. And of course, we need money to help them to prepare for a membership. And then I just give you a few examples. There are many more, of course. And then, of course, we have a responsibility for other countries outside the proximity of the EU. I'm talking about Africa and so on. When it comes to humanitarian aid and also development assistance, this becomes even more important because we all know what is happening on the other side of the Atlantic, with the US sort of withdrawing a little bit from the commitments that they've done in the past. So all in all, I understand that I've reached my 3 minutes. This resulted in a proposal in this summer from the Commission that will have to be approved by all the member states and also by the Parliament before it's final. So this is just an early proposal, but the proposal is slightly larger than the current budget. It's a lot of money. It's 2 trillion euros, which is 2,000 billion euros, or 20,000 billion kronor. Anyway, 2 trillion for 7 years.
For the years combined.
For the years combined, for all the 7 years. And if we break it down, it's the equivalent of 1.26% of the GNI. And I think that relative figure makes more, how can I say, sense to understand these figures. So 1.26% of the combined GNI in the EU allocated to the EU budget. And for comparison, how much money does for example, Sweden tax its citizens? Well, if we look at all the 3 levels, so local, regional, and national level, it's something like 45%. So I think these was a lot of figures. I'm sorry for that, but I think it's good to have a little bit of proportion of what are we talking about. And with that, I
think it's a little bit the same as the percentage of environmental taxes, but I'm
Possibly.
not totally sure. But it's about the same, between 1 and 3, somewhere around that. So, Lena, what are your thoughts about the challenges for Europe and how to meet them with a strong budget, maybe ambitious, expensive, or who knows?
Or very complicated.
Yes.
Yes, I've sort of met and worked with the budget of the European Union and the positions as a mayor in a very small municipality called Valdemarsvik on Östkusten. 8,000 inhabitants. I've been in the Swedish Parliament in the Committee of Finance. I've been 7 years in the European Parliament negotiating budget and Horizon, which is the research program and so on. And I've been a Minister for Environment and Climate. And now I work with boards of different kinds. So I've seen all aspects on how the European budget works out in reality. And I think the difficulty is to try and transfer these huge numbers into daily reality. But if you're a citizen of Lund, we have a lot of researchers up on the LTH, which is working with the graphene project, for example, EU-funded. We have the MAX, the huge research institute, and we have the ESS, European Spallation Source, which I worked with the budget on a government, on behalf of the Swedish government to try to get finance and to get negotiations and an outcome that would make it workable for those scientists who are there. Many of them who left US on the last Trump period and are still in Sweden. So I think what the Commission is proposing is actually quite revolutionary in a bureaucratic, administrative way, because it is starting out with strategies, working with the member states on their strategies, and from that trying to formulate how the budget should look and the content. And this is, of course, from my point of view, I think that's a very good way of working and different from before, which was really a top-down project. Now it's more a top-down, down-top again project. It's working together with the member states in another way, also working with the parliaments in another way, I think. So that's good. On the other hand, it's the way they are lumping things in trying to achieve some sort of simplicity. They are lumping big chunks together in a way that hasn't been seen before. And if you talk about competitiveness, and if you know something about how companies work and industry work, and also how private persons think when it comes to investments, you need to know in beforehand what is happening for many years, at least 5, 10 years. And this way of doing the budgetary negotiations means that we won't know anything until the first year, in 3 years, and then it should play out nationally after that. So we don't even know, from my point of view, as a company or as a private person or a researcher or a student or whatever, we don't know what will happen. And that means if you have as the second priority, the first is security, which everyone applauds, I think, because we support Ukraine. Okay. And the second thing is competitiveness. After the really shocking report from Mario Monti that really told how the situation is in Europe when it comes to competitiveness, it's very bad. We need to shape up all over. But to be able to invest, you need to know what is happening. And this is contradictory.
So they are trying to create some flexibility maybe, but that means also that it lacks a bit of transparency.
Yeah.
So
and if
it's difficult to assess.
I worked a lot lately with the Royal Academy of Forestry and Farming, KSLA, on security issues. I mean, energy, warming, food, and so on. And what do we need to keep it going in a situation of crisis? And if you're a farmer or if you're someone in this food security chain, it's there's no way you can tell about your own conditions in 3 years or 5 years or 8 years. There's no way you can be sure that you can run your company. And I think that is contradictory. And that is a danger in the midst of this aim to renew the budgetary process.
Thank you. And Helene, you're with us online. I hope that the sound will work and that we will hear you. So we listened to President von der Leyen's speech the other week here, and she said that Europe needs to be bold. Exactly what that means. Well, if you didn't listen to the speech, then you should do that at some point. It's quite interesting. But there are a lot of issues on the table for the European Union right now. And action costs money usually. So what's your viewpoint on this, Helene?
Thank you, Maria, and dear friends. It's a great pleasure for me to be invited to EU Days. I would have loved to be in Lund, of course. Lund feels like home to me as a citizen of Skåne, but also because my youngest son is now studying at the university. I'm in Brussels, and we have a lot of ongoing meetings and negotiations. And Lena mentioned that she had been a MEP, a member of the European Parliament before. And just like Lena, I have been also a mayor in my hometown, Kristianstad, and also a minister in the government. So we can see at each level, it's the same issues we are discussing. And what Maria said is so spit on the point, because we live in troubled times in Europe with the war in Ukraine. And today we also discussed the war crimes we see taking place in Gaza. We are also reminded daily of the climate changes in our everyday life. We can read about it and feel about it with the temperature increases, with fires and floods. So when we are going to discuss the proposal from the Commission, we need to discuss, so priorities must come first before we talk about size. And then we can look at the big picture. The EU budget must prioritize the right things. The EU budget should be allocated to common goals, and these challenges I mentioned, where security, of course, green transition and competitiveness are central. The Swedish contribution since the beginning, I will say, must be kept low. Out of respect for Swedish taxpayers' money. The exceptional global situation, war, hybrid threats, we heard about Copenhagen this morning, and this global economy in danger requires a new approach and a holistic mindset. So new joint common loans are not the way forward. They only postpone the cost to future generations. So I think we need to prioritize, and we need, of course, investments, green investments, and we need, just to underline, the most important, we need a pro-European majority. We have so many seats for the far-right representatives after the election. So we need, coming back to a pro-European strong Europe that shows courage and that take leadership in a difficult time. Thank you.
Thank you, Helene. I will have a follow-up question for you, because it's here between the lines that you stand strong for the Swedish opinion that's been the one and only opinion since the start, that we should keep our contribution to the European Union as low as possible, more or less, but still be able to do some of the most prioritized issues. I understand that some other countries, like Denmark, for example, they have sort of changed a little bit of their course on those topics. But you feel still that we should be frugal, so to say. We should take care of the taxpayers' money and prioritize.
Thank you for the question. For me, it's not a goal itself. But if I see all the discussions together, I can see that we need to take the fight for more correct using of our money. We have a lot of incorrect payment in Europe. We need to see that if we have a lot of loans, we need to still pay them. And of course, we need also to see how we can protect what is national competence and what is the competence for the European level. And sometimes when I hear the debate in the parliament, I can see that the ambitions also from my colleagues in my S&D group, they are so high. They want to solve everything on the European level. But for me, it's really important that the local level, the national level, and the European level, they have different responsibilities. And if we have this perspective, then I'm sure we will have also a lower budget, and it's better for Europe than we know that we can pay it.
Thank you. I will send the question to you then, Johan. For me, it's quite refreshing with this viewpoint, because as I've been a politician myself, I know that usually everyone asks for more money. It never happened to me that anyone came to me and said, you know, we have too much money, please take some back. So how would you respond to this viewpoint, which is, in a European perspective, a bit rare, maybe?
Yeah. No, there are many things to say about it, I think, yeah? And of course you're right. I mean, the Commission driving these things, this is our raison d'être, to push forward, how can I say, European policies and so on. So, but why do we ask for a bigger budget? I mean, first of all, it's not that hugely much bigger than the existing one. It's 1.26%, as I said. I looked it up. I think that the current one is actually 1.13. And then we should also include that 0.15 we need to use to repay the next gen EU loans. So deducting that, it's 1.11. Okay, 1.11 compared to 1.13 or 15 in the existing one. But still, it's more money, of course, because we have growth in the economy. I think an interesting also, for me, how can I say, a good way of reasoning is found in Draghi's report, where he compares the EU with the US. He says a lot of investments and research money are spent on a central level in the US, which makes them more, how can I say, more efficient. They can choose things which are of strategic importance on a federal level, and then they can allocate to different projects. And I believe, and I think that's the reasoning from the Commission, that these things exist also in Europe. There are certain strategic projects that that is better to actually finance on a European level than on a national level. But of course, Helene is right. I mean, we should, every time we decide on where to finance money, we need to reason if it's better to do it on another level. But I think the Commission in this case, or no, I don't think the Commission in this case, when it comes to the budget, has found certain number of areas where we need to spend money on a central level, as I mentioned before, energy infrastructure, AI, etc.
Now I put on the other hat and go to you, Lena. You and me both have worked for the green transition, for example. Huge investments needed. Right now we can see member states allocating their own national budgets, but means also competing with each other a little bit on that. Is that something that could be an argument to increase the budget on the European level? I know you represented a party who are pro-decentralization and maybe do not want to spend that much either on the EU level, or what's your viewpoint?
12 years ago, that was the case.
Yes, that was the case.
I think if you look at what is new in this proposal, trying to answer your question in another way, maybe, if that's allowed, it is the biggest, or maybe the second biggest, proposal for a multi-annual financial framework, MFF, ever. So, of course, it's huge, but it's also, the European Union is huge. And I think one of the things that you will see in the public debate is the principle that nothing is paid out unless you follow the principles of fair state or human rights or democratic rights. This hasn't been spelled out in that way before. There has been discussions, you know, there's been a huge debate about Hungary, which I think you've followed if you're interested in European issues. And the text that we've seen so far is so much sharper than it has been. And this, I think, will be very interesting to follow in the negotiations the coming years before the final decision is taken. And simplicity, I've already touched on that. Here the Commission needs really to prove itself. We've seen nothing about simplification so far. Nothing. It's even adding, I mean, yesterday I read from Finansinspektionen in Sweden about the new rules for banking and insurance, and it's not simplification, I can assure you. But what the Commission is trying to introduce is own resources. And that is also a development that has to be debated widely, I think. Can there be financing from the emission trading system, which is, by the way, the only system that works when it comes to bringing down CO2 emissions. So we should be very, very careful to protect the emission trading system. That's one. And of course, we have the CO2 adjustments at the borders in different ways. But then there is something interesting. A fee, if you have a difference between what you have produced and what you are recirculating. Today, there is a fee for Sweden for 1 miljard svenska kronor. Because there is a difference between what plastic is produced in Sweden and what is recirculated. And that gap means that we as a nation pays 1 million Swedish crowns to the EU budget. Now they're moving on and looking at electrical waste in the same way. I think this is really interesting because this is a win-win-win sort of thing. It's introducing innovation and new technology. It's pay if you don't recirculate. So I think this proposal is actually very good.
And those are the own resources that you mentioned.
Yeah, in the country. And of course, then there's a tax on tobacco. I don't mind. And it's fees from big companies working on the internal market. But this way of trying, I mean, the Commission has for decades tried to find its own financial sources. And in this budget proposal, they are taking a big step forward, I think, with new sources. And I think this is smart as long as it serves 2 or 3 or more purposes, like with plastic waste or electrical waste.
I go to Helene now. I know the Social Democrats, like generally, at least before, has been a little bit skeptic to these own resources, at least if it was right to tax taxpayers in Europe. But what do you think about these new ideas in the budget?
I would say that the issue of new resources is popular in the discussion here in the Parliament, but it's really sensitive for Sweden. And we know the background because the difference between own resources and a tax system is quite similar. But also we can see when we use it in favor of the climate transition, for example, we know about the tax for the plastic tax. It was really good. We saw it in Sweden. The government threw it away. I'm so sorry for that. That was a good example how we can put pressure on the climate transition and use a sort of tax system. And we use the money in the European system also. So another example is I was the rapporteur for the waste directive, and the background is that we know that people in Europe waste a lot of, for example, clothes and shoes. Exactly 12 kilo per person and year in Europe. And we have decided in the negotiations and in the new directive, then we need to have a stronger system for the responsibility for the producers. So that's also a sort of fee, a sort of tax system that will support what we aim to have as a result, a better world and a greener world and a circular economy. So I'm really positive when we can have this, see this together. But as a principle, of course, we protect the Swedish tax system. Finally, I will also take the opportunity to underline what Lena said about the principles of rule of law. It's really important that we have this strong text, because we can see that we have member states during the last mandate. They have got a lot of money from Europe, and they use it not in the way of the values we have together in Europe. They use it in a national, another way, away from a democratic and fair state. So we need to be really strong on the fundamental democratic values when we discuss the money in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's check if we have some questions from the audience. No. Does the audience know that it's possible to send questions? Do you have the Menti code? Just a reminder. Okay, let's move on then. There you can see. So it's another Menti code for this room. So if you send the questions to the other Menti code, they might ask them in the other session. Which could be fun, though. Who knows? But yes, so let's move on to the issue of the regional development and agricultural policy. Johan, can you explain to us, they are sort of merging a bit these budgets and also want to distribute it a little bit differently than before. Can you explain what it's all about?
Yes, that is true.
So that's a lot of the EU budget.
That is a lot, yeah, that's a big part of the EU budget. So if we say that the total is 2 trillion, then what we call the national and regional partnership plans is 865 billion. So 44%.
For 7 years.
Yes, for 7 years. Yes. And that is true. Here we have combined cohesion policy and the common agriculture policy and the social fund and a few others. And the idea is to package them together, to link them also to the European semester, meaning the monitoring we have of the development in the member states. So to have a more integrated approach. And then the member states and the Commission will draw up plans for how this money should be spent. There are certain, how can I say, restrictions or caveats. A certain amount, 14%, should go to social targets, 43% to climate and environment, and
not many percentage left now.
No, but I guess they can overlap. They can both be climate and social, I guess. So I guess there could be a bit of double counting. And then there are certain amounts for the agriculture and to the poorest regions. So there are certain limitations with this.
But is this just a way to sort of hide the fact that they are decreasing that total budget a bit?
Yeah, no. I mean, it's a way of simplifying.
It wasn't in my paper that I should ask that question.
Very rude question. Was it? No, I'm just kidding. No, what we're trying to do is to simplify.
Yes.
So the overall budget has been simplified to much lesser programs than we had before, and that is to facilitate. One of the things that Helene was mentioning, the way that we monitor this, and to make sure that money are spent properly, and also to facilitate for the project owners, so that they.
But there is,
and it's not that they are taking the money for themselves; they are actually spending that money on security policy, for example. So it might be different priorities. Lena, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah. I mean, always in all the years of negotiating the EU budget and the MFF, it's always been one keyword: simplification. It's not been seen for decades in reality. And this has to happen. It has to happen. And right now there's a big, the buzzword, when you're working with the industry and companies and insurance like that, it is the omnibus proposals that are supposed to simplify things. well, they will not be into place into at least 2 years. There's a lot of negotiations on every detail still going on, and at the same time, the machinery continues to produce more detailed regulation that causes administrative costs, which is not simplification and it's not being competitive. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Nice guy, but I'll just heave it on you.
I think you're a bit unfair because we have produced a few of these omnibus simplification packages,
and if
and
you
they're now
them,
with the Parliament.
You haven't seen the result of them.
No, we haven't
in
seen
practice.
the result
No.
yet, but we're working quickly.
And still, the last thing was when you're reporting on the environmental issues and sustainability, is a new set of regulations on how you report what kind of floors you have in your buildings all over Europe. That's not simplification, and I don't understand what the Commission will do with the combined knowledge about this.
I'm super curious about the car that the Commission is going to build, but I will not ask about that because I want to know if we have questions from the audience first. Did we get any questions? Still no questions.
Oh.
Okay, I won't ask about the car, but I will leave the word to Helene.
The questions are the funny part.
I've heard that there has been some concern from the Parliament that the democratic control of the budget might be weakened because of these changes to the regional development and agricultural policies. I understand it. Is this something that you've heard?
Yes, there is. We have just started the discussion in the Parliament, and of course, everything is open for discussion now. And the regional level is at the top of the agenda because we know that all these funds means a lot. Also in Sweden, we know a lot of regions are depending to have development from these EU funds. I welcome that we will have a discussion about the agricultural sector and the money, because we need to see that the subsidies need to be used more fairly and effectively. And coming from the countryside in Skåne, I can say that being a farmer, we need to run, they need to run a company, and they need to be more compared to companies in common. Because we have all focus on the subsidies. So we need to support with the green transition that we use the money for development and around all the challenges for the farmers. And so today we have certain countries continue to receive a lot of these large amounts of money, and that's not fair. So I welcome the discussion and look forward to connect it also to the MFF discussion in common.
Thank you. We have a question from the audience.
Yes, we do. What is the biggest challenge when it comes to agreeing on what is to be financed with the budget?
Yes, Helene, can you answer that? What are the biggest obstacles to agreeing on an EU budget, usually in the Parliament?
My answer will be that after the latest election last year, we have a totally new situation in the Parliament. We have had for the last mandate a pro-European majority between the Conservative, my political family, the Liberal political family, and also the Greens, where we together took a lot of leadership. For example, in the Green Deal, with a lot of legislations for different related issues as transport and energy and so on. Now we have a lot of challenges in the Parliament, because we can see that the Conservative group, they negotiate a lot of these proposals together with the third biggest group in the Parliament, and that's the far right group, and also the second biggest, the ECR group. So we have a totally new situation, because when we vote at the final vote, the far-right groups always vote against Europe. So the risk is that we water down a lot of solutions, a lot of amendments on the way to the final vote. And then we will have weaker legislations and all what you call omnibus and simplification and so on. Of course, it's good with simplifications, but when the result is that we have political groups that want to water down what we need to do, for example, for the green transition and the security, then we create a problem for Europe, because then we are not a strong force longer. So I'm really worried, and that was my honest answer.
Yes, thank you. I think we are getting close to the end of this session, because we are supposed to be in the other room soon. So maybe we'll need to just have some wrap-up question. And I mean, there are a lot of initiatives in the European Union last mandate for preparedness, for security, for the green transition. And this budget is the chance that you have to fund all those things that are supposed to be happening and all those targets that are supposed to be reached. So if you look at the budget, what's your biggest priority right now? If you could answer that. Helene, do you want to start?
Yes, I can say very briefly 2 words. To continue to work together for our security in this really worrying world we are living in. And the other one is the other threat, the climate. We need to continue the climate transition, the Green Deal, and to implement all the legislations we already have decided, and to do it in all the member states, because we need a stronger Europe. And for Sweden, I will say Sweden needs Europe, but Europe needs Sweden.
Thank you. Lena?
Yes, we've touched on security, we touched on environment, climate, very important. We haven't said anything about enlargement. I think that is extremely important from all kinds of levels, and I was very active in the negotiations with the last enlargement when the Eastern member states entered the European Union, and that has had a real security effect, an effect on a better environment for those people living there. And I remember one representative, a very high diplomat from one of the countries, just came out of he told a story, just came out of the prison, and his son asked, Father, why is our flag red and white? Red because we're a communist country, white because it's not our fault.
And Johan, you get the final word.
No, but they're all interlinked: competitiveness, security, and climate, of course. I mean, if we move away from fossil fuels, we will get lower energy prices in Europe. Our companies will be more competitive. So they're all interlinked. But I think if I can say something at the end, I wish that more people could understand that the euro spent on a European level can sometimes be more worth than if it's spent on another level. Not always, but sometimes.
Thank you very much. And if you didn't get your questions answered, then come to the mingle at 3:30 and maybe someone can answer them. Super, great. Thanks. And now we're going back to the other session hall.